Ricky's just coming back, and Ariel's just telling me he's not going to make it, but we're going to start. And if we can, we'll try to finish the parak. We'll see. We're on the bottom page, Peites Amud Aleph, last line, right before the last line. It says, "Hamisnavi b'shem avodas chavim." Someone obviously says a prophecy in the name of an idol. Kagoy Nevi Abal so that's considered obviously a navi that's misnavi b'shem avodas chavim. That's punishable by death. I believe Misi Midei Shemayim. If someone holds back their prophecy, who is the example? Yoinam ben Amitai. Yoina, the story of Yoinam, Vater al Divrei Navi, or if a person makes light or mocks, depending according to whose opinion, the words of a Navi. Turning to page on days. So here the example is going to be the friends of Micha. Chavrei de Micha. What's the story of Micha quickly? Micha was the prophet in the time of Achav, and because Achav didn't kill the king of Ben Hadad, I think, I'm not sure where Ben Hadad was, maybe he was in Aram himself. He didn't kill the king Ben Hadad, and he had compassion on him, so Hashem punished him that he's going to, the prophecy was that he's going to fall to the hands of Aram. And that was when he was in a joint effort with Yehoshaphat. So Micha said in the prophecy, one of the prophets says to a colleague, which was Micha saying to a colleague, God said you should strike me. It means Micha was telling the other prophet to strike him. So the person wouldn't strike him. So Micha tells his colleague, because you didn't listen to me. So then he's going to get killed, and he got killed by a lion. So that was a prophecy as a hint to Achav, that because he didn't strike Ben Hadad, so therefore he's going to lose the war with Aram. We'll see quickly the Rashi. The Rashi says, so what's the story? Micha ben Yimale, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He said prophecy al Achav lipo biad Aram. He was the one who said the prophecy that Achav is going to fall to Aram. Hey, Howard. So he's going to fall to Aram. This is again the war with Yehoshaphat and Achav. Why was the prophecy? Why was he punished as such? So he says because Shnafel ben Hadad biyadeh, because Ben Hadad, which was another king, I think, fell into his hands, and he sent him peacefully, as opposed to Hashem told him to kill Ben Hadad. This is what Achav told Yehoshaphat, that when Yehoshaphat said, we learned before that one of the false prophets is the one who said the prophecy that Achav was going to win, and Yehoshaphat asked that he should bring a prophet of God, give me a real prophet. So he said, let Micha say prophecy. So Achav said, I don't want Micha. Why? Because Micha he doesn't talk good to me. He talks bad, because if Micha told him the prophecy that he's going to be punished because of not killing Ben Hadad. So why do you say he doesn't speak good about me? So the Rashi continues, as Zu love, because he already told him that he's going to lose because he didn't kill Ben Hadad. And then when he told the prophecy to his friend to strike him and he didn't strike him, so the so that's an example of a person who mocks the prophecy. So the person who mocks the prophecy was the friend, seemingly the friend of Micha. It's an interesting story. I mean, someone says, hit me, God said to him, so he doesn't hit him. So he says, just like God told, he continued, just like God told Achav to kill Ben Hadad, and he didn't, and look what happened to the prophet that didn't listen to the prophecy to hit me, and he died from a lion. So too, Achav is going to die. Okay, so that's the case of a person who mocks or doesn't listen to a prophet. It doesn't say clearly why this person didn't hit. Obviously, he was talking to a colleague, why he didn't hit him, but it says that he died. So the same thing, that was a simon that so too Achav was going to die. Okay, we have to check it out more in Navi. Okay, then he continues. Another case. What about a prophet that doesn't listen to his own prophecy? It means he gives a prophecy about himself and doesn't fulfill his own prophecy. It means if there's, we'll give an example of Idai. Idai was the prophet, Idai Navi. Idai was the prophet who was sent to Yeravam ben Nevat when he set up the two idols in Dan. and he was serving the idols, and he said the prophecy then, and he about the prophecy of Yeshayahu, that Yeshayahu is going to become, that there's going to be a son born to David, etc., etc. So he wanted to strike him, and then his body froze, and he wanted to have mechila. He felt bad, Yeravim, and he wanted him to come eat with him. He said, I can't eat with you because God said I shouldn't eat with you. At that moment, there was an older prophet that, according to Omer Farshim, was once a good prophet, and he saw that and he wanted to break this idui, and he said that God told me to tell you that you should eat by me. And instead of listening to his own prophecy, he listened to the older person who ended up being a false prophet at the end of his days, and he also ended up getting killed by the lion. And there's the famous story: he was lying on the road by the lion, and the old man came in back and buried him. Also, these are very interesting stories. So what's the example? God told me, he tells us after he said the prophecy to Yeravim, and after Yeravim's body froze or his arm froze, so he couldn't, so he had charata, so he said, come eat with me. He says, no, and it says, so then also the old person told him to come back and eat by him. So he said, no, God told me I can't eat by anyone. So the old person said, I'm also a prophet like you. And like the Mefarshim say, he was a legitimate prophet at one point. So he listened. So he went back with him. And afterwards he had a prophecy from God while he was sitting at the table. Why did you eat? I told you not to eat. And then he ended up getting killed by the lion. This old man came back and buried him. I think the idea of this old man was that he was Mamash Rasha, this old Navi, that he wanted to break the prophecy, the spell, so to say, that Edu put on Yeravim. Say, look, he died. He wasn't a good prophet. I think that was the idea. See Rashi quickly. Rashi says, Eider Navish Nisnava Mizbeach Hashem, Bebeis Kel, Shahai Yeravim Mikater Love, Ubedir Yam Gabi Shiyah Chsiv, Hu Haya Eidei. It's talking about that he was a prophet about Yeshayahu, and it was Eidei was the prophet. So therefore, he said this prophecy, and also he didn't listen to his own prophecy. God told him don't eat. So why did he eat? Okay. So the Gemara continues. Tani Tana Kamed Rav Chizda. Someone learned in front of Rav Chizda. Hakovish Nizvasei Laki. If someone doesn't say his prophecy, then he gets malchus. So the obvious question is how prophecy is a private moment with you and God, and malchus requires a person to get you have to have warning, etc. So how could you get malchus? According to most of Farshim, the malchus is not a regular malchus because it's I think who's it? Taisvis. It's not a regular malchus. So I think it's a Taisus on another page. Yeah, Kovish Navasai. So Taisus on another page says, less by lav. There's no lav. Right? Aim by Maisi. He didn't do anything. It falls under the rules of the certain times where it's not a proper malchus. It's like a person who doesn't want to do mitzvahs say. It's brought down halacha. If someone doesn't want to build a sukkah, so you could beat him until he decides to build a sukkah, until you kill him. It says, so that's that kind of malchus where the person is not malchus because there's no lav. He just was told his prophecy, and he's no mice. He didn't do any action. He just didn't say his prophecy. So therefore, it's a kind of malchus that's a malchus to force someone to do what they're supposed to do. Hey, Bruce, we're middle page 89-2, towards the top. We're just starting the case of Yonah Hanavi. So until now, we learned about the person who mocks the prophet is the story of Micha, who said the prophecy to the king of Achav that he's going to die. So there, the person mocked one of the prophets mocked him or didn't listen to his prophecy, and he was killed. Another case was the prophet Edu, who said a prophecy to Yeravim ben Avat, and he was told by God not to eat. He didn't listen to his own prophecy. So that's an example of a person who doesn't listen to his own prophecy. And now we're talking about a case of a person who holds back his prophecy that he should get lashes. Again, not lashes, traditional lashes, but lashes for a person who's not willing to do what he's supposed to do, which is kind of its own classification, where they would beat him until the person would either do it or could possibly be beaten to death. So again, Tana Kamed Rav Chizda. A Tana learned in front of Rav Chizda, not a Tana obviously, but one of the people of the base medrash. A kovish is in someone who holds back and doesn't give over his prophecy, like he gets a malchus. Amalei. So the Rav Chizda says to this Tana, Man the ochel tamri barbel laki. if a person eats like in a basket, he eats figs privately, he gets malchus, meaning to say it's a private moment that he doesn't. Man Masribe, who's going to warn him that he should say his prophecy? So Abai said, Chavrei Nevi'im, his friends, the prophets, his colleague prophets, I can tell him why you're not saying your prophecy. How did they know that he has a prophecy? It was private. It was a talk between him and God. So Abai says, that there's a pasuk that says that God reveals his secrets to the other prophets. So the other prophets is kind of a crew. It's kind of a chevra. So even if the prophecy wasn't told to you, but your other prophets are in on it, that there was a prophecy. So maybe they know there was a prophecy. Maybe God, reversed the prophecy and he regretted it, so to say. So maybe that's why he didn't say his prophecy. So the rabbi says no. That had God reversed the prophecy, everyone would have also been in on it. So they would have all known that the prophecy was reversed, and they wouldn't heckle him. So basically, when a person got a prophecy, evidently, even if it was a private prophecy, even before you even gave over the prophecy, the other colleagues knew about it, whether God went forward with it or he kind of had regrets on it, or changed his opinion, whatever you want to say. We want to choose our words wisely here, not regret, chas v'shalom, but God decided to reverse it. But either way, the other prophets would know about it one way or another. So therefore, they wouldn't hack him. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? By Yonah Hanavi, what was the story of Yonah? Yonah says a prophecy seemingly of the destruction of Nineveh, and he's upset because he knew God would be forgiving, and then God did reverse it. He didn't continue. He didn't destroy the city of Nineveh. So we see that there's times even Yonah didn't know that God was reversing it. And Yonah didn't know about it. It wasn't like Yonah was told by God, I'm not going to destroy Nineveh. He just didn't destroy Nineveh. So even if the prophet himself doesn't know about it, how about the other prophets? How are the other prophets supposed to know if God reversed it or not? So here's a beautiful word that the Gemara says. It's also brought down in Rashi on the prophet Yonah. It says, Mikara Ninveh nefechas amrlei. God never told him he's going to destroy Nineveh. He said he's going to turn over Nineveh. The word nefechas, like Rashi says, can mean tshuva, nefechas from that they change or Nineveh changes. But he never said that. So the prophecy stayed. And but Yonah didn't know is it going to be is it a good prophecy or a bad prophecy? A good prophecy means Ninveh ne'efechas, the people of Nineveh will do tshuva, they're going to be nehafech, they will change. Or it's a bad information like Sodom V'Amorah is going to be nehefechas, that the city is going to turn over. So therefore he was upset. He didn't want to say his prophecy because he didn't want that they should do tshuva, and then it would reflect, most opinions hold, because then it would reflect badly on reflect badly on the Jewish people. I'm just going to read the Rashi says, the prophecy initially was that Ninveh nefechas. So he says, Baruch HaKodesh, that was the message he got from Hashem. It could also mean positive. That their actions will go from bad to good. And because they did tshuva, then the prophecy happened. Why? Because the prophecy happened. Why? Because they changed. So that's what happened. There was change in Nineveh, but it was the people who chose change, not the destruction of change. Actually, Rashi on the Navi says, he translates nehefeches nechreves. That nehefeches means to be destroyed. But then there's a footnote on the Rashi that says it's not necessarily nechreves. It can be nechreves. It could be destroyed. It also could be tshuva, like the Gemara says over here in Sanhedrin. Okay. So here's another case of a prophet that doesn't say his prophecy. Now we go into the question of, how do we know about a prophet? We get actually to a complicated question, because we're going to tackle now the question of Eliyahu Navi. What happens if a prophet tells us? There's certain things in Torah that are very there's certain things, bless you. There's certain things in Torah that are black and white. So someone who wants a black and white religion, Torah is not, Yiddishkeit doesn't work like that. It's not everything's black and white, right? And Pinchas killing Zimri, that only a zealot kills. That's also, bless you, it's also a very risky thing. Same thing with nevuah. Torah says very clearly what you can and can't do, and comes a Navi and says to do something that Torah says not to do. Like Eliyahu Navi says to sacrifice on Har Carmel, to sacrifice, which those days you were not allowed to do sacrifices outside of the temple because the temple was standing in Jerusalem. So there's, it's kind of, you have to have, there's the Torah wants you to have faith in the prophet and to understand that the prophet could tell you to do something that seemingly the Torah would say not to, and we trust that the prophet is able to change it. And the Rambam writes it's not just prophecy. Even a Bezdin could go against what it says in the Torah. It doesn't have to be a prophet specifically. But here, let's see what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, "Mevat al nav divir navi." So a person who mocks the prophet gets punished by death. But the question is, they have like, so why would he get punished? How does he know that he's saying the truth? Maybe he's just a false prophet. You want me to, how do I know that the prophet's a prophet? So he says, ice, because you give ice, you give a sign that you're a good prophet. Again, the Chumash and Dvarim goes into the ice question. If he gives a false ice, the halacha is basically, if he gives if he gives a sign, means he shows like Moshe. Moshe came in and he says to God, "I'm going to tell the Jewish people I'm redeeming you." He says they're not going to believe me. So first, Hashem says you're saying lashon hara on the Jewish people, the ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim, they believe. But second of all, he says you'll give an ice, he'll give a sign. So he turns the water into blood, and he makes the snake. So when Moshe establishes himself as a trustworthy person, so now whatever he's going to say is prophecy, you have to listen to every word Moshe says. So he gives an ice. But the only one time the Torah says that, no, I don't care if he gives an ice. If he tells you to do avodah zarah, then there's no ice. The Gemara later is going to have machlekes if he can do an ice or not. Rabbi Kiva says it's not possible that he could do a real ice. But again, chas v'shalom, we have, I don't want to get into it, but you have religions that have been established on officially a prophet doing a miracle, and then he goes and says to stop doing Torah mitzvahs, to serve avodah zarah, right? So if he gives an ice and he says to do avodah zarah, then we don't listen to him. But otherwise, we listen to the prophet. So he says that's why it was very hard for Yeravim ben Avat to turn the people around, because he wanted them to do avodah zarah when they wouldn't listen to him. So Mamish had to figure out a whole scheme to trick Achi Ashaloni to sign a paper, etc. Okay. So the Gemara says. So the Gemara asks the question. We don't find every time a prophet says a prophecy, he gives a sign. For instance, Micha, what we just learned before, Micha told his colleague to strike me because God said you should strike me. The other prophet could have said, "What do you want? I never heard you. How do I know you're telling me the truth? Maybe you want me to strike and then you can take me to Bezdin. I don't want to strike you." So Micha doesn't say anyway that he gave a sign that God told him that the prophet had to believe him that he told him to strike him. He didn't give a sign, nevertheless the person got punished. So the muchsik shani. This is the idea. That once the prophet becomes a muchsik, becomes an established prophet, then no longer does he have to give an ice every time he says a prophecy. Whether you understand it or not, you have to listen to the prophecy. Here's an amazing word. If you say not, it gives a pashut, a fresh perspective of the whole story of the Kedah. So the Gemara says, if you don't say that an established prophet no longer has to give a sign, you listen to whatever the prophet says. So is Hechi Avram Bahar Maria? Why did Yitzchak listen to his father? His father tells him, "We're going on a trip." He says, where are we going? We're going to make a sacrifice. Eventually he tells him, "Where's the sacrifice?" He says, "You're the sacrifice." At that point, Yitzchak said, "Time out. Where are you getting this from? Who decided that I'm the sacrifice?" He says, "Why would Yitzchak listen to his father? He's letting his father kill him without any proof. How did Yitzchak believe his father that there was such a prophecy?" So the answer is because Avram was an established prophet. Once Avram was an established prophet, and Yitzchak knew his father was an established prophet. So when his father says the prophecy is that you're the carbon, he goes b'simcha because that's what Hashem wants. Also, Eliyahu Bar Carmel, Eliyahu on the Mount Carmel, when he goes and he does a sacrifice that is against the Torah, meaning the Torah says not to sacrifice outside the temple. How did they trust him? But of the shchut and they went and they did sacrifices outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Once he's established shiny, it's different. Okay, I think the Rashi says Rashi says in a very interesting point. Says, let's say Rashi. How do we know that the prophet's a good prophet? Rashi says, Heichi Gaver Shezeh Navi, Hi Gaver, how does that person know? It means the other person, the person who's hearing the prophecy. Shezeh Navi Emes, how do you know that the prophet's a true prophet? Shakadosh Baruch Hu Ein Shei, therefore I get punished because I didn't listen. Maybe, for instance, in the case of Micha, the colleague thought the guy that Micha was a false prophet. Therefore he didn't listen. And what's interesting, so the Gemara answers, so Rashi says something interesting. Rashi adds a word that seems to be extra, and I think this answers a question that I had. He says, when he's established. What's Rashi say? What's it mean established? Not just that he's an established prophet. He's established who tzaddik v'navi emes, that he's righteous and a true prophet. Rashi should say that he's established that he's a true prophet. That's the question at hand. Why does Rashi add the word tzaddik? I think the reason is because evidently from the list of people that we've mentioned, last week and this week, there were a lot of the prophets that were ended up being killed or punished for saying false prophecy or whatever they were doing that was against halacha were established prophets. These were established prophets. It means they had at one point they were saying prophecy, and then when they got punished for saying either false prophecy or doing something else. So if they're established, again, if we see clearly that established prophets are saying false prophecy, like the one in Edu. Edu said, I said not, the God told me not to eat. And the old person said that I'm also a prophet like you. And Mefarshim say he was a prophet, a good prophet. And now he said a false prophecy. So Edu should have known that what's the difference? Even if God said it to him, he told him differently. So he doesn't have to listen to the old prophet, even if he wasn't lying. Because God told you not to eat, don't eat. When he told someone else, it's a famous thing the Rebbe once said to someone, what I tell someone else has nothing to do with what I tell you. You hear something that's to you. Someone else is to someone else. So you had a prophecy not to eat. That's nothing to do whether the person was right or wrong, but he wasn't right. So why was he, how could this chazakah work? Because we see clearly the prophets that start off as saying prophecy end up going off. I think that's why Rashi adds, it's my opinion, tzaddik, that the chazakah is that established prophet doesn't just mean that the person's a prophet, he or she. There's also female prophets, but he's a righteous person. When a person's a righteous person, so that's a person that you know is going to remain a true prophet. I'm assuming that's the pshat, unless someone else has any other ideas, because otherwise we see clearly that there's been muhzik, there's been prophets have been established. However, they've gone astray. Unless Tosfos discussed it, I didn't learn that Tosfos. Okay. I mean, Tosfos does discuss the idea of Eliyahu Bahar Carmel. I have to check if he discusses that question. So he says, okay, the Gemara continues. Again, I want to say most Mefarshim bring down that's not just a chazakah that he's a prophet. Even a bezdin can make changes. That's a discussion that Tosfos goes into. That even the bezdin can make changes of the Torah, but here also that he was a prophet, so therefore they listened to him. Okay, now the Gemara goes into just the analyzing. Once we mentioned the Akedah, we're going to analyze the story of the Akedah. We're continuing in page 89. I'm assuming page 2 or 3 in the art scroll. The Gemara says like this: "V'hi achar dvar meila." We know how does the story of the Akedah start? In Shvi, the 7th reading of Vayera, is that after these words, Valikim nisas Avram, God goes and tests Avram. So what are these words? What conversation is the Torah referring to that we're not part of? Achrei ma, what are we talking about? So Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Yossi ben Zimra, Acher Dvorav shel Satan, after the words of the Satan. Techsiv like this. The portion before the Akedah is the great feast that Avram makes on behalf of his son Yitzchak. There's a little question because there's a time gap. But either way, he makes a feast either when he was 2 or 3 or 13. So it says, Vayigdal Yelad Vayigamal. So Amr Satan Fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Satan says to God, Rebbeinu Shalayla, Master of the world, Zokin Zed, this old man, meaning Avraham, Chanante Lemei Shana, you made him you were able to make him plant pre-betan. He had a child at 100 years old, right? Mikol Sudishasa, nevertheless, all the meals he made. He couldn't find one animal, even a bird, to sacrifice, thanking you for making him a father at such an old age. So he kind of it says it's brought down the Mefarshim say that this is a Yisod, that from this Gemara we learn that the Satan, where's the Satan say his kitrug? Where does he say where does he come to God? When Avram makes a meal. And Avram makes a big meal, he says, well, what did Avram do for you? So it says from over here that from this Gemara, so to say, Achashverosh learned that Achashverosh made a big meal for 100 and something, whatever it was, 180 days. So Achashverosh was a learned person, King Achashverosh, the story of Purim. And he knew that a meal is a time of kitrug. I think the Kli Yakar brings it down in Parshas Tetzava. He knew that the Chaim HaKadosh, one of the two, that he knew that a meal is a time of kitrug. And because he knew it's a time where people could say things, and people make a big meal, other people say, wow, why? Look at this person is making such a big meal. Whoa, we're splashing so much money. What has he done for God? So therefore it says that he was careful to make everyone happy. It says he made more food, less drink. He wore the big day Kohen Gadol, it says. To try to break, it says he wore the clothing of the Kohen Gadol to try to break the kitrug of a meal, because a meal is a time of kitrug. And how do we know it from this Gemara? Because in this Gemara it says that after Avram made the big meal, so then the Satan comes and tells God, what did Avram do for you? Look what kind of meal he throws. What has he done for Hashem? So Hashem answers the Satan. That means after these words, after the words of the Satan. So Hashem answered him. God tells back the Satan, the Satan, he's ready to do anything for his son. Nevertheless, if I would tell him to sacrifice your son, before him, he would right away do it. And therefore, this is Avram. So Satan says, go test him. And that's when Hashem tested him. He says, Reb Shimon bar Abba says, it's a famous Gemara. The Gemara says that God says, please, I'm asking you. When he says kachna, God is pleading with Avram. Why? It's an example. You have a king. He has many wars. He had one strong fighter. And he fought for the king all the wars, like Avram fought all the wars for God. Comes the time, a big war came. So the king tells this fighter, I'm asking you, please be victorious in this final battle. So people shouldn't think that once this big battle comes to form, it could shine a light that all the other battles weren't real victories. Because now that there's such a difficult battle and he couldn't win, so maybe he wasn't such a fighter in the first place. So therefore he says, so Hashem tells Avram, you've been tested by me with many tests. And you stood up all of them. But now comes this huge test. You have to take your own son and sacrifice him. It's a famous, the Rebbe has many talks on this. They shouldn't say that the other ones have no substance. Because when we see, Avram is ready to put up at this test, he's ready to burn himself for God, right? In Or Kazim, he's ready to jump in the fire. But what is he? If God asks him to sacrifice his own son, is he ready to jump in to put his son in the fire? He's able to kill his son. So Hashem says, maybe they're going to say that the tests that you've withstood until now were some minor tests, but a big test you couldn't stand. And therefore, it weakens all the tests you stood up until that point. So, so as bincha. So he tells God, he tells him, go take your son. So Avram's playing, I'm taking your word literally. Beis banim yeshli, I have two sons. Yishmael was also a son. He says to God, which son do you want me to take? This is Yechidcha, your only son. He says, what do you mean my only son? Each one's an only son to his mother. At that point, Avram only had one son with Yishmael, Hagar, and one son with Sarah, Yitzchak. So he goes, which son that's a Yachid that only has one parent are we talking about? So he says, Asher Ahavta, the one you love. So Avram tells God, I love both my sons. So then Hashem says, as Yitzchak, that I mean Yitzchak. Why couldn't God just tell him right away, take Yitzchak? Why did God have to say, take your son, your only son, the one you love, Yitzchak? He could have just said, take Yitzchak, and then Avram wouldn't have any questions. So the idea is you can't just throw something like that on someone. He shouldn't lose his mind. If God just came and told him, boom, this is going go take Yitzchak and go sacrifice him, Avram would have could have possibly lost it. So in order to to soften the blow, God, engaged them in a conversation. We find that also when God asks, similar to that, was when God asks Adam, Ayeka, where are you? So now he says, okay, so what happens? So the Satan loses that war. So Allah, Kadmu Satan Derech. The Satan is not done doing his job. He jumps to the road and he meets Avram and he says, Hanisa Davar Alecha Tla. So he says like this, Madua, why is the one who loves you so much is asking you for such a ridiculous test? What's going on over here? He says it doesn't make sense that God is asking from you. He challenged God to Avram. He started to ask, say to Avram, Hanisa Davar Alecha Tla? This makes sense, a kind of test. Is he Yisarta Rabim V'Yadayim Rafa Techazek Koishel Yakim Maleach? He says to him, you are always strong, you're always chazak. You gave life to all the people in the world. And now he's asking you to do this thing of killing your son. So Avram says, I go simple. I don't ask any questions. God said to take Yitzchak and I'm going to sacrifice him. Notwithstanding of your argument to say that I did so much for God, why would God ask this for me? Right? This is the challenge we all have in our own ways when when we wonder why bad things are happening to good people. So Amalai said, the Satan said to him, your fear of God is your foolishness. Because you're a fool. What kind of person behaves this way? So you have to trust in Hashem. This is that so Amalai said, Avram says to him, Zacharna mihu naki avad. He says, Zacharna mi, tell me who naki, who's clean, avad gets lost. Nothing gets lost. Don't worry about it. I have no questions. What I have to do is to kill Yitzchak. I've never seen a person that's a tzaddik. He says over here, the translation says, tzaddik einim afsin mirasek. A tzaddik never loses from being fearful. It doesn't say that it means that Avram thought he wouldn't kill Yitzchak. But he's saying, you telling me that I'm a fool for being fearful to God. There's no such thing as being a fool for being fearful for God. So, when he sees he's not listening, that he can't argue basically. He can't argue Avram out of being listening to Hashem. So then he tries to make it less of a test. He says, he goes, I'll tell you, I heard from the other side. I heard it being discussed on the other side of the curtain. That you're not going to end up sacrificing Yitzchak, you're going to end up sacrificing a sheep. So Avram says to him, now you want me to believe you? This is the punishment of a person who's constantly trying to lie. Even if he says the truth, even what you're saying is true, I don't believe you. And therefore, until God told him to not sacrifice, he obviously goes up and tries to sacrifice Yitzchak. All right, so that's according to the opinion of, I think it was Rabbi Yochanan, right? So now Rabbi Levi says differently. He says, yeah, Rabbi Levi says, it's not talking about the after the words of the Satan and God. Satan said to the God, what has Avram done for you lately? What has he sacrificed for you? But it was a conversation that Yishmael and Yitzchak had. It means according to what we've learned until now, the so to say what brought on the test of the Akedah was Avram not sacrificing for God. And therefore, Satan saying what Avram doesn't really love you, and therefore it's a conversation that's kind of connected to Avram. According to Levi, it's about Yitzchak. Yitzchak, so to say, brought it upon himself. As it says, I just want to say, I saw one of the Farshim says, asked the question, obviously, why I don't say there's two when he quotes from Eov that your yira is like your kislecha could mean like a fool. He says that this one translation is that the fact that you're fearful of God, that should have been your strength, and your fear of God ends up bringing you down. But the Marsha says, like I said, that it's a fool's fear. I'm trying to say that they ask why didn't why didn't he sacrifice? I mean, the Satan is saying nasty stuff and all that, but why didn't he sacrifice? So I saw it says, I'm not sure if it's the art scroll, somewhere else it says that he didn't have to sacrifice because Avram Avinu was so connected to God, so plugged in. He didn't have to, like, when a person sacrifices a thank you, it's when as if you're saying that you're separate from God, and therefore you're thanking God for giving you Yitzchak. So why didn't he sacrifice something for Yitzchak? Avram Avinu was so connected. Everything was about him was Hashem. Yitzchak was part of his journey of Hashem, of serving Hashem. There was no like private moment that Yitzchak was like a private gift. Every part of Avram Avinu's being was serving Hashem. So he didn't look at it as if this is something personal that I have to be thankful for. Every minute I'm out there, I'm thankful. Every second I'm doing this for God. This is part of my avodas Hashem. I saw someone answer that. So now Levi says like this. Levi says that Yishmael and Yitzchak are having a conversation. Right? These are the conversations we're having in 224. Yishmael says to Yitzchak, I'm better than you b'mitzvahs. The famous conversation. You had no choice. You were circumcised at 8 days old. I at 13 years old made a decision to circumcise. I'm better than you. So Yitzchak says back to Yishmael, with one limb you're trying to mess with me and show that you have greater self-sacrifice to Hashem than I do. If God would tell me that you yourself should be taken as a korban, and so God says, is that so? And God says, you have to care for what you say. So Yitzchak said, if God would ask me to sacrifice myself, not just one limb of my body, I would do it. So God said, so then God, after those words, after Yitzchak committed himself to do anything, then Hashem Taka tested him on that itself. I just wonder if, according to Levi, we would still have the question of Avram being a muchsak as a Navi, if Yitzchak kind of was the reason that it happened, so then he would know why God tested him as such, because he was the one who offered that test. But even so, God didn't tell Yitzchak, you should be sacrificed. God told Avram to sacrifice Yitzchak. Okay, let's go further, a little further. Tanur Barim, we learned. Navi Shediach, Navi, this machlekes basically finishes off the Mesecha, the parak. Navi Shediach, a Navi that tells others to go serve idols is beskila. Like Rashi says, that he says a prophecy that God told me to tell you, you guys have to serve prophets. So then the punishment for that is skila, stoning. Reb Shimon says no, that's also by choking. I'm just going to read the verses. The verses says, there's many verses over here. It says, "V'navi ahu ayachel machel mahu yumus kidav v'sar el Hashem leikechem v'yitzchem Hashem v'peitchem edicha min haderech asher tzivcha Hashem lekech lechas v'barter mikabecha." So the word says the hadichacha, that he pushes you to serve idols min haderech, from the way Hashem told you to go. That's the verse that says about nidicha, pushing. Okay, we'll get back to that verse in a second, because from the verse is the machlekes. So Reb Shimon says, so the rabbis say that if a prophet tells you to serve idols, then he gets put to death by stoning. Reb Shimon says by choking. But then there's another law. There's the law of the people. They're not prophets, just people that push other people in their city to go serve idols. So then the rabbis say it's skila, the punishment is stoning. Reb Shimon Amar b'chenek, it's also choking. Why did the rabbis say? What's their foundation to say that a prophet who pushes the community to serve idols is punishable by stoning? So my time to run in it says, like I said before about the prophet, it says the hadichacha min haderech, and it says by maces also the pasuk, and that also the person is an instigator. It's different than an nidachas. An instigator is, like we learned, a person who instigates individuals to do idol worship. So there also by maces, it says the word hadacha 17. The viskaltem bavanu meski bikash lahadichacha uses the word that it pushes you. So therefore, there's both the words. It's called gzer shava. Malahalan beskil, and then there clearly it says The pasuk says uskaltam bavanim, that you give skila for a person who's a mason. So too a prophet that says prophecy about serving avodah zarah is also with skila. Afkam skila. Reb Shimon says misaksiv, but Reb Shimon Rashi says something interesting, that Reb Shimon doesn't have the gzer shava. Gzer shava, you have to do a gzer shava, to take two verses and find common words, and to say that the common word in the verse is to teach us the halacha, like in this case, right? It says the word lahadichacha, hadacha by a prophet, and it says hadacha by a mason, by an instigator. So we take the words and say, just like the punishment by an instigator, clearly the Torah says it's stoning, that is to teach us that also by the prophet it's stoning. But you have to have a Messiah that we do the Gzer Shava. Gzer Shava is not a person can't just open up a verse and take two verses and say, well, these two verses look similar, it must be teaching us something. You have to have a Messiah from Moshe Rabbeinu back, that this is the way you learn it. So Reb Shimon did not have this Messiah. And Reb Shimon says, therefore, it says the word Misa. Misa means choking. And whenever it says Misa in the Torah, it means choking. Anytime it says Misa in the Torah, without specifying what exactly the death sentence is, how you go about doing it, is Stam Eini Elechenek is choking. Okay, so what about Madichi Arnidachas? The how do we know that a few individuals that push a city and turn the city into a rebellious city is in idol worship is stoning? My time in Rabbanan. So Gamri Hadacha. So there's the word Hadacha, also by Irnidachas. And so either they can learn it from a mason, or they can learn it from one of the two. Once we establish that a prophet that pushes someone to serve idols is stoning, so therefore individuals that push a city to do the difference we've learned, the difference between Irnidachas and a mason is individuals. A mason is just an instigator who tells one person to go serve idols. Irnidachas is where people come and try to push a whole city to kind of rebel. Never happened in history. So nevertheless, we also have a Gzer Shava. Over here, Reb Shimon did have a Messiah, but he says, Reb Shimon Gomer Adacha Adacha Minavi. We learn, he says, because he learns that a Navi is Chenek, so therefore he compares Irnidachas to a Navi. V'ligmer mimesis. Why don't we learn it from masis, from an instigator? He says, "Dana mesis ram, vein dana mesis ram, mesis yachid." The instigator of the city he's instigating a whole bunch of people, and also a prophet is a person of the public. So we put public together, and therefore, just like a public person is punishable by choking, so to a public setting of idol worship is also punishable by stoning. Whereas the mesis is an individual. So the Rabbi says, so the Gemara says, "Adra danin hedyet mi hedyet." Why don't we take a simple person, like a simple person who instigates a city, to a simple person who instigates a person? And why do we learn a simple person that instigates a city from a prophet that's not a simple person? So Reb Shimon says, he says, what are you talking about? So what if the person's a respect? He's teaching us a lesson. There's a lesson in this Gemara in his answer. He says, what, you're telling me that because the person was once a prophet and he's a person of stature and therefore he's a public figure? What's more simple than a person that tells you to serve idols? And therefore he's they're both simple. But the difference is one is a public figure, doesn't make him special, and one is also, and therefore someone who goes publicly to instigate a city is different than someone privately instigates an individual. Okay. I just want to see if we could try to pull off the end. It's a whole page. You know what? Let's stop here. We'll have to finish next week. Holding on Reb Chizda. The Gemara goes into basically, we could try to read it fast, but no point. Okay, let's stop here, Chevra, and we'll pick up. Hopefully, we'll finish Elo Nechnakim next week and start Chelik. I wanted to, before we finish. There's next parak is the very famous parak of Chelik, which is a lot of Gemara that talks about very complicated subjects of the Chumash, of the days of Mashiach, of the house of David. There's a lot of preview that people learn before they learn Chelik. One of them is the Hagdama of the Rambam of Maimonides. It's not so short, so either we could learn it first, or I could post it and everyone could read it themselves. It's both in English and Hebrew. The Hagdama of the Rambam to Parak Chelik, to give us an understanding how we're supposed to approach the information about Mashiach and Chiyas HaMeisim, etc. All right, everyone. Laila Tov and Shavua Tov. And next week is Tisha B'Av. So easy fast. We'll have to see if we're going to have a class. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.